As to where trans women should compete, I don't have any solutions because, again, I don't care about sports. But there is a reason that men and women do not compete with one another in almost any sport. So if you are a fan of sports, try to respect that.
So what is going on here? Well, this is part of a video by a YouTuber called Professor Dave Explains. And this video is going to be about how, trans people are a thing and we need to all respect that and it's biological and there is no possible chance it could be psychological in origin. I don't think he makes that claim, actually, that it cannot be psychological in origin, but he actually does make the claim without realizing it that he's saying it's psychological in origin, period. That's what he's saying, period. And I find it interesting that there are these people who are science-minded and want to use rationality and critical thinking to support this cult mentality. And he has these great science-based videos like "Science isn't dogma, you're just stupid." Well, I mean, peer review process is dogmatic. Come on now. You take a look at the history of biological anthropology, natural killer cells, the tumor killers, the golden era of pharmaceutical research, and all these things that are, trying to be fact-based, or at least on the surface seem fact-based in their notions. And he claims to be using logic and reason and scientific principles to understand the world. But this ideology is so insidious, is so subversive. This trans ideology, it even fools these people who think that they are science-minded. So let's take a look at this video, and I can tear it apart piece by piece for you. Now, before we get started, thank you all for stopping by. I do appreciate everybody coming by and supporting my work. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. You can find me on Rumble, on X, and on BitChute. Links are down in the description. Now, let's dive into this video.
Now, it's no secret that I'm a bit on the liberal side, but rest assured, the left is not going to get away scot-free on this one. They're missing the mark on a few key points. But as tends to be the case, it's bigots on the right who are the main problem, so let's start there. The primary issue is people who deny transgenderism. These are the people who spew the tired Fox News talking points. Liberals say there are 89 genders and anyone can identify as a hamster, that sort of thing. It's a deliberate caricature of reality peddled by all the angry conservative dudes popping up in my feed lately who claim that nobody can define a woman.
The woke claim that there are dozens, if not hundreds of genders, so why are you blaming Fox for this? The woke are the ones who are making these claims, not Fox News. Fox News is just saying, wait a second. He said there's how many different genders? Maybe even there's thousands or even millions of genders according to the woke. What now? This large number indicates to me that it's not a biological phenomenon because we don't see this reflected in the animal kingdom anywhere, right? If we saw this reflected in the animal kingdom, then maybe I could agree with you, but we don't. We don't see it reflected in any other organisms on the planet. Seems to me it's a psychological phenomenon because of that.
Let's all take a moment to acknowledge the problems that go along with the ambiguity of language. Sex and gender are different words that refer to different things. If you did not know that, now you do. Sex is a chromosomal phenomenon. Nearly all of us have 2 sex chromosomes in all of our somatic cells. If both are X, your sex is female. If one is X and one is Y, your sex is male. There are interesting exceptions, like intersex people who exhibit a blend of the phenotypes associated with the 2 sexes due to chromosomal irregularities, as well as chimeric beings who exhibit different genotypes in different cells due to developing from more than one zygote. It is important to discuss and understand these populations. However, we can still safely categorize the overwhelming majority of people as exhibiting either male or female sex. Gender is...
So I claim it comes from psychology. He doesn't realize it, but he does too. Because we have psychoactive drugs, right? Psychoactive drugs affect the neurochemistry in your brain, don't they? Is that how this works? So you're telling me that it's psychological, but it's biological. We're going to come back to this. Now, talks about there's a difference between sex and gender, right? He said that, didn't he?
Are different words that refer to different things.
And he points out there's intersex people and chimeric individuals to prove this. I'm assuming that's what he believes. See, there's these people that are in between somehow. Yeah, those are the exception. Biology makes stupid mistakes sometimes. It does weird stuff sometimes. There are people who are born with dwarfism. Nothing against those people, but that is a disorder. That is not the normal. So let's take a look at the etymology of gender before people jump down my throat, because they're going to anyway. So we have the etymology of gender here, and the reason I want to talk about this is because people keep telling me, oh, gender and sex don't mean the same thing. You don't know. You're stupid, anti-woke warrior. You're an idiot. Well, let's see what happened here with the word gender. In 1300, kind, sort, class. A class or kind of persons or things sharing certain traits. From Old English, gender, genre, kind, species, character, gender. From stem of Latin, genus, Race, stock, family, kind, rank, order, species, also male or female sex. Oh, wow, what do you know? First to your male or female sex. What a weird coincidence. From pi root gene, giving birth, beget. With derivatives referring to procreation and familial and tribal groups. The unetymological is a phonemic accretion in Old French, also used in Latin to translate Aristotle's Greek grammatical term genos. The grammatical sense is attested in English from late 14th century, defines grammatical gender by reference to the Indo-European distinction of masculine, feminine, and neuter. And this is grammatical gender. That's what it just said. So this used to exist in English. It doesn't anymore. I'm going to refer to German, der, die, das. German has 3 different words, der, die, das, and has a bunch of other words too, of course. But the der, die, and das are all the. Those all translate to the. But one is male, one is female, and one is neuter. Whether the division be based on the natural division into 2 sexes or on that between animate and inanimate or on something else. Right. So the masculine, feminine, and neuter refers to any object can be any one of these things. I mean, there's no real rules for determining what object uses what version of the word the. The male or female sex sense of the word is attested in English from early 15th century as sex took on erotic qualities in the 20th century. What do you know? Gender came to be usual English word for sex of a human being. Wow, what a weird coincidence. In which use it was at first regarded as colloquial or humorous. Again, wow, what do you know? Later, often in feminist writing, again, feminist is just code word for woke, with reference to social attributes as much as biological qualities. This sense first attested in 1963, gender bender, from 1977, popularized from 1980 with reference to pop star David Bowie. So this is a new phenomenon that we forced into the language. Before it referred to words or kinds of things, and then to people, right? Of one biological sex or the other, not of sexual expression. You're shoehorning this stuff in. This is what I've been saying. Don't shoehorn language. Let it change organically. Here's an example. The word dumb does not mean stupid. It means cannot speak. However, people use it all the time to refer to somebody who's stupid or something that they think is stupid. And that is not that big of a deal, right? We all kind of accept that, hey, language changes. Don't force it. Let it change on its own. By forcing it, we know that you have an agenda, that you're trying to force us to change the way we think about things. Why? Why are you trying to change us to think about things in a different way? In a way that may not be accurate. In a way that means you're trying to push an agenda. Move back onto the video here.
Gender is a different phenomenon. It is still biological, but it is a neurochemical construct. This means that ultimately it is still genetic in basis, but it absolutely is not determined merely by the sex chromosomes.
All right, what evidence do you have that it is genetic in basis? You know, there's been a real push in the last few decades to say that everything, all of the human characteristics are genetic. We see this with alcoholism. Oh, you're an alcoholic? Oh, that's genetic. Oh, you're fat? That's genetic. Everything. Don't bother putting the bottle down. Don't bother eating fewer calories during the day. It's all genetic. There's nothing you can do about it. It's a push to take the blame off of humans who are destroying their own lives, basically. Oh, you're a poor victim. You're a victim of genetics. It's the victim ideology. That's what a lot of this woke stuff is. It's just the victim ideology. Now, how do I know that trans is not genetic? By the way, he doesn't bring up any evidence. Where's his evidence? Please show me the evidence that there's a genetic link. How do I know it's not genetic? Anti-warrior, haven't you seen the twin studies? Look at all the things that are genetic. Look, if you don't know about the twin studies, they're fascinating. You'll have identical twins that are raised in separate continents who've never had any contact with their biological families at all. They were separated at birth, adopted out, raised on different continents, and their lives turn out eerily similar. Like in some cases, it's like, aside from the location, exactly the same. And even the locations are the same. Like they'll buy a house on Elm Street in both different continents. It's crazy. It's like, how? Okay, that's weird. Right. Well, as fascinating as that is, and as much evidence as that is to support the idea that humans are just basically just all genetic, I've known identical twins that you would look at and go, they're not even related. Or at most you'd say they're cousins. That's how much of a factor nature can be. on a human being. I've known identical twins. One was gay and one was not. I've known more than one set of twins who were that way. And to further drive home the point that not everything that human beings exhibit is genetic, did you know that there are people, of course, we know that there are people with multiple personality disorder. Did you know that sometimes in the same person, one personality will exhibit a physical ailment, a deadly physical ailment that can only be managed with modern technology. And none of the other personalities exhibit that same disease. Explain that. Same body, different mind. One of the minds has a disease, the other one does not. Yeah, everything that human beings has is genetic. No, it's not. It's just not. Indicating to me that all this trans stuff that we see in the world is psychological. Now, I'm willing to go so far as to say every once in a great while, someone is somehow born in the wrong body. I don't know how to explain that. I don't understand the biological mechanism, how that would happen, because we develop in the womb as either male or female, and our brain develops along with that, right? Our brain and our body develop at the same time. So I'm willing to give you a little bit of leeway there, but this is going to be an exceedingly rare occurrence, maybe happening, 15 times in the entirety of human history, which is not very many people. Moving back to the video.
It is tremendously more complicated, and researchers are still working to understand the biological basis of gender identity. Human psychology is complex. People need to deal with that. Thoughts and feelings are ultimately chemical phenomena. We all have a neurochemical profile that guides how we think and feel, and part of that is gender identity.
So you see, he just admitted it right there that it is brain chemistry, which we can, of course, modify with drugs.
The reason that we are just now becoming equipped to differentiate between the two phenomena is that in the vast majority of humans, somewhere between 99 and 99.9% of all people, gender identity aligns with biological sex, hence the term cisgender.
Yeah, cis is an insult, right? So they can call straight people sissies? Isn't that how that works? All right, well, all joking aside, cis means, as we can see right here, on this side of. And that is not exactly the same thing as same or same side. In fact, it's very different from the word same. And it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as same side, right? Those same side and on this side of can have different meanings. So, yeah, you misinterpreted the etymology of the true meaning of the prefix cis. If you look at his video, it says same/same side up in the upper right corner here. He's just wrong. As usual, these people don't know what he's talking about. And it says right here that this came from the 90s, from psychological journals. I don't know who these psychologists were who were using it and what their agenda was, because they're using it wrong. I don't think of me having biological characteristics on this side of having any meaning at all. It doesn't mean anything to me. I have biological characteristics on this side of male. Yeah, man. What do you mean on this side of male? Where's the cut? Where's the point where we're starting from? Wow, this is just wrong in so many different ways. Now, he said this, which I have to address too.
Thoughts and feelings are ultimately chemical phenomena.
So neurochemistry can be changed. It's not concrete, is it? I mean, that's how this works, right? Psychoactive drugs do this. I think this guy would agree that depression, at least can be, if not always, is caused by a chemical imbalance, and we can address that chemical imbalance with psychoactive drugs. So please tell me, I'm sure you've done the research about research done into gender identity. What brain chemistry is out of balance, causing people to think that they don't feel this, by the way, they think that they are the opposite gender, or something in between, right? Because gender is a spectrum, right? Yeah. And what can be done to correct this imbalance, if anything? And if nothing can be done, why? You know so much about this subject matter and you think it's so much a biological thing. Well, we change all sorts of things in biology. Why can't we do anything about this? Is it because it's a psychological problem? And often psychological problems cannot be dealt with. Right? Psychology is not a hard science. So there are people who claim that they have a limb that is not their limb. We know this. This is a big deal. People were talking about this years ago now. So should we treat those people by cutting off their limb? Or should we find a way of treating them that does not involve mutilating their body, removing parts of their body, changing their body in a way that is detrimental potentially? Some people will go trans and they're perfectly happy, but a lot of people go trans and they're perfectly not happy. There's all these genders. How come we don't see people going, you know what? I need to get an operation to change me to a Zer. That's what I need to do. No. People are like, I'm I'm a man trapped in a woman's body. I'm a woman trapped in a man's body. Any of these other 38 different genders or however many there are. So it doesn't make sense to me. Please explain all this to me because it doesn't make sense. It literally does not make sense.
This is a prefix that means same. But for that remaining fraction of a percent, which totals to millions and millions of people all over the world, their gender identity is the opposite of their biological sex, hence the term transgender. Trans is a prefix that means opposite. The unfortunate linguistic coincidence is that we use terms like man and woman, or male and female, in describing both of these phenomena. That is where the confusion arises, when people insist that one term must encapsulate both phenomena at once. So when someone asks, what is a woman, expecting to get a very simple answer that children can understand, they are sorely mistaken. The answer requires a discussion of genetics and neurochemistry.
This requires a discussion of genetics and neurochemistry, really. The definition of woman is not really that difficult, but nobody can give one. We all have known what a man was and what a woman was until like 10 years ago. Now all of a sudden it's a big mystery. We don't know. We can't tell. It depends on the individual. A woman is anyone who identifies as a woman, which is a circular definition and can't be used. So it doesn't explain anything. A chair is anything that identifies as a chair. That doesn't help me if I don't know what a chair is. If I know what a woman is, you can use circular definitions. They work really well when you know things. Moving on.
Therefore, when people complain about men choosing to be women, this is very offensive. It is a denial of the concept of gender. It is no different than the conversation that was happening surrounding homosexuality a few decades ago. Conservatives would say that homosexuality is just demons or temptations from Satan, and that heterosexuality is the only way people can truly be. Today,
Okay, well, I mean, you would call me a conservative, even though I'm not. I wasn't until like 10 years ago. Now all of a sudden I'm conservative because everything shifted so far to the left that I'm like super hardcore conservative. I don't believe in demons. I don't believe in Satan. So this used to be thought of as a psychological disorder. Sometimes scientists get things wrong because now you would say, hey, look, the scientists have figured out that being gay is not a psychological disorder. It's just the way some people are. Like a huge percent of the population is that way. It's amazing. He's going to go into the numbers on homosexuality here. So I don't know what to tell you about this. It's not that hard to figure out that this is a social contagion when you look at how it breaks down across the world.
Today, this seems totally ridiculous because homosexuality and other sexual orientations have become accepted and normalized, even among many conservatives. The same will happen for transgenderism because it undeniably exists. The acceptance for suppressed sexual orientations came first because around 10% of people are gay, whereas a much smaller percentage of people are trans.
Okay, so the 10% of people are gay. No, they're not. I came across this. I took a sexuality class when I was in community college, and they said, yeah, 10% of people are gay, about 7% of men and about 3% of women. That's 10% of people. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. And I went out in the world, and I believed that for a while, and I started thinking about it. Wait a second. I know hundreds of people. Where are all the gay people? How come I don't know that many gay people? How come I don't know 10% of the people I know are not gay? How come I don't come across gay people every single day? Because I probably come across 100 people in a day. I should come across like 10 gay people. Even if it's a light day and I only come across 50 or 20, I should be coming across gay people every single day. Yet I don't see anybody behaving in a gay manner or telling me that they're gay. And I've known, more than 100 couples. Well, that's because 10% of the population is not gay. We have here, what is the percentage of the population that is gay in the United States? And you can go look at it by state. Like Maine has a super huge percentage of 14.9. Is that really that high? But it's different throughout the states here. And if we come down here, we can see, here we go. LGBTQ population rate. In Vermont, it's 1.23. We got in Indiana, 2.9, New York, 2.57, and so on and so forth. We don't see any numbers here that are above 3. Looks like 2.9 is the high point even. Oh, we got some up here that are 3. So 3.57 is the high point in Maine. But if you come down here, the total for the United States is 1.76, less than 2%. And that seems more reasonable considering how many people I have known in my life that are gay. Much more reasonable. So you're telling me that it's about the same number of people in the world that are trans, even though that's a much less common experience? Yeah. Find that hard to believe, assuming these numbers are correct, which that seems right to me. I mean, that's just my perspective, but 10% of the population being gay? Think about how many people you know and how many of them are gay. How often do you come across somebody who's obviously gay? If everybody's, so accepting now, there's so many homosexual people out there, so accepting of the homosexuality, then how come they're not everywhere? I don't know. I don't get it. But again, I don't have the woke perception of the world. Let's take a look back at the video here.
But this is the natural progression of societal evolution. Nearly every binary has been shown to actually be a spectrum, and it doesn't matter how uncomfortable it makes conservative people.
So if every binary is on a spectrum, tell me, how does that serve society as a whole? That's the whole point, really, I think, that the conservatives are trying to get at. Like, so I'm not a conservative. I know you guys think that I am. I know the woke watching this think that I'm a conservative. I'm not. Not really. But how does that serve the greater society, claiming that gender is on a spectrum? What does that do for our society? Nothing that I can see. There are men and there are women. Women get pregnant. Men are the ones who impregnate. The 10% of the people that are gay thing, I remembered this now. That came from Alfred Kinsey. And he is known to have used like tainted samples to do this stuff. He was looking at sex offenders specifically and saying, oh, well, 10% of them are gay, so that must be the whole world. But in the mind of a psychopath, which I'm assuming he was, I don't know for sure. I mean, I don't know Alfred Kinsey. I never met him. But he seemed like he's pretty sick in the head. He probably has this notion that everybody is a sexual deviant like he is. And subsequently, I'm going to look at these people and they'll be a perfect representation of the wider world. Even though you're looking at a cherry-picked group of people and using them as a representation of your whole population.
Society will continue to shift until our language and policies reflect actual human nature, not the tiny puritanical box that has historically been thrust upon us.
So prove that this is how people actually are. That's what you have to do. And there are big questions like, why are more people in California exhibiting this than in other states? We saw the breakdown of gays. Why is it so weirdly distributed across the country instead of more evenly distributed? If it was really a biological phenomenon.
Now, as promised with the indictment of conservatives complete, I turn to liberals and the missteps they are enacting that are preventing resolution. Number one, please stop saying things like gender is a social construct. No, it is not. It is a biological construct. Society can't turn you trans any more than it can turn you gay. Gender is determined biologically.
Okay, trans is determined biologically. No, it's not. It's determined by your social environment. And we see this happen. There was a guy, I read his account online somewhere, and he was saying, like, I spend all this time around thousands of trans people all of the time, and I don't have any inclination to turn trans. And then a year later, he's going like, they botched my sex change operation. I don't know what to tell you other than it is a social phenomenon. There are trans trenders. This is the thing. It's obvious. When we see people going, hey, the school called me and told me my kid is trans, so I moved, and now my kid's not trans anymore. It is obvious when we look at the breakdown of trans people across the world. Share of people identifying as transgender, gender fluid, non-binary, or other ways worldwide as of 2023 by country. Switzerland, 6%, Thailand, 5%, Italy, 4%, Sweden, 4%, Germany, 4%, Spain, 4%, France, 3%, Brazil, 3%, Japan, 3%, Romania, 3%, Canada, 3%. Why such huge disparities? Now, these numbers are obviously wrong. Obviously wrong. 6% of the population is not trans. There's no freaking way. Even if it is as common as some of these people think it is. This is a much higher percentage than the homosexual population, which we know this is a much smaller percentage of the population that is trans. Because how many trans people do you know compared to how many gay people do you know? You probably don't know any trans people. People who are truly like, I want to change my gender. I dress like the opposite gender because that's the way I really feel. You probably know none. I've maybe bumped into a few living here in California for years and years now. So, but why the big difference? This is biological. It happens in the womb. You're born this way. It comes from your genetics. He said it comes from your genetics. Why is it that Canada has half the percentage of their population that Switzerland has being trans? And we could probably go down through this list here and get down to, you're looking at Hungary has 1%, Portugal has 1%, Peru has 1%, Argentina has 1%. We can look at this other map here. It's not a complete map. When you look at the United States, there's 1 million people in the United States who are trans. And we compare that to Brazil, a country with also 1 million trans residents. But the population of Brazil is significantly less than that of the United States. Here we have the population of the United States at 333 million and the population of Brazil at 215 million. And you might think, well, they're just estimating, right? And of course, these are all estimate numbers. They're not 100% accurate. But this chart here lists out 900,000, 800,000, 700,000. So if the percentages were the same, Brazil has about 66% the population of the United States, 65%. So shouldn't they have 600,000, roughly 600, 700,000 trans people? So why all this disparity if it's biological? You can even look at India here with over 1 billion people living in it, and they have 100,000 people who are trans. Why these huge disparities in the population? Why is it so different? Maybe it's not accepted, but there's all these different countries here where it's different. It's not like it's not accepted in India, I'm sure. I'm sure that's not accepted, so people aren't coming out and saying, hey, I'm trans. But there are people who are saying they are trans in India. And why is it such a smaller percentage of the population than it is in the United States, which is a smaller country? I mean, it's barely anybody in India compared to how many there are in the United States by percentages of the population. These are things that don't make any sense. If it's a biological thing, these are things that don't make any sense.
It is simply that, again, gender is not determined merely by the sex chromosomes and is an incredibly complex neurochemical phenomenon. So let's talk about it honestly. Gender roles are a social construct, that all men must be this way and do these things, and all women must be this way and do these things. That is a social construct, and it is one that became obsolete immediately upon evolving beyond a hunter-gatherer society. It has only persisted due to deeply rooted misogyny and the desire to treat women as private property.
Seriously, I don't want to treat women as private property yet. There are gender roles. And who's claiming that all men have to be a certain way and all women has to be a certain way? Who's claiming that? There are certain proclivities, and there are certain things that only women can do and certain things that only men should do, but nobody's claiming that all men must be a certain way and all women must be a certain way. The notion of gender roles didn't become obsolete as humans moved into an agrarian system of society. That didn't happen. To make that claim is myopic, incredibly myopic. Throughout most of human history, most people could not afford a wet nurse, right? Many women develop health concerns during pregnancy, which make it difficult, if not impossible, to reasonably engage in non-physical jobs available to them today. Some women, as a percentage, which turns out to be many women in our society, can't work while they're pregnant, lose the ability to work while they're pregnant. Imagine the more physically demanding jobs that we had women doing in the past. They just wouldn't be able to do them because they were pregnant. So gender roles are, there for a reason. This is not something that just disappeared when we started settling down and growing our food instead of hunting it. The reality is men are disposable, right? This means that men are the ones who are going to war and engaging in peacetime defense of society. They should be pretty much the only ones doing that. Women are not disposable. Do I need to go on with this? I mean, I can give you many more examples of how gender roles still play a role today, thousands of years after we stopped being hunter-gatherers. And they should play a role because there's just simply biological differences between men and women.
Rage against gender roles as a social construct all you like. I'm right there with you. But stop saying that gender itself is a social construct. It is biological. In addition, sex is a much more easily definable biological construct, and we must acknowledge that when an individual that is of the male biological sex identifies as trans, their biological sex remains male. By identifying as trans, their chromosomes do not change, no matter what surgeries they choose to undergo. We rightfully refer to them as women because most of us have decided that it is appropriate for a society to respect their gender identity over their biological sex as a linguistic formality. If one's sex is male and their gender is female, why not refer to them as female and address them as they wish? This is a simple and obvious courtesy, but their sex does not change, nor is their transgenderism selected.
No, it's not a linguistic construct. We already went over this with the etymology of the word gender. For simplicity's sake, I would refer to a person who looked female as female or male as male. I'm going to refer to them as such. That way I don't confuse the people around me unless they also can see that the person is not the gender they're claiming to be. Now, this can lead to mistakes, of course. When I was a kid, me and my friend were looking for these tubes that ran underneath the railroad tracks. There's big tubes with they had at least a 5-foot diameter, maybe bigger. There's big tubes, and we were walking along looking for these tubes, and a kid came up to us, and we were like, oh yeah, we're looking for the tubes. And that kid was like, oh yeah, they're over here. And I said something later about that kid, and I referred to that person as a he, and my friend's like, what are you talking about? That was a girl. And this person was not trans or trans presenting, but considering the way they were dressed and what they looked like, I did not realize that this person was a female. But my friend knew that person, so he knew that she was a she. So there can be mistakes. You could dress up like a man, or you could put on male or female affectation and then present yourself differently, and people can make mistakes. It happens. Now, I think this is really where the woke are coming from, because They say just because you can do that, like you can make the mistake of seeing a woman and thinking that she's a man, or seeing a man and thinking that he is a woman. Say you see a man from behind and he has long hair. You're like, oh, that's a girl. When I had long hair, people thought I was a girl all the time. All the time, they'd be like, excuse me, miss. And I just walk away because I'm that way. Like, I'm not going to acknowledge you if you can't tell that I'm a boy just because I have long hair. That's the only thing that I have. I mean, I have facial hair. I have broad shoulders, narrow waist. Okay, whatever. But I think that's where the woke are getting their ideas from, because you can appear to be female even though you're male, even though you never claim to be female. Or you can appear to be female even though you've never claimed to be anything other than male. So therefore, you must be on a spectrum. Let's continue on.
When liberals attempt to decouple gender, or even sex, from its biological basis, they give conservatives license for mockery, because they can then rightfully criticize what seems to them like a vague and meaningless declaration. That's why smug, ignorant conservatives who make a living stirring up hatred amongst bigots get so much traction by cutting together cherry-picked compilations of young people saying silly things, like gender is a social construct, because they get to go look at the dumb liberals, and it is a rare instance where they aren't completely wrong. This emboldens them and makes them feel justified in pushing other talking points that are completely wrong.
No, but it is vague.
What seems to them like a vague and meaningless declaration.
Right? You said that gender's on a spectrum. So it is vague. How is it not vague if gender's on a spectrum? What are you talking about? Your own definition. Gender exists on a spectrum.
And finally, on a cultural note, I think that we need to stop flipping out about innocuous things that comedians say. Let us reserve our anger for those who are in denial of science and are attempting to limit human rights. When someone attacks Dave Chappelle on stage in my town of Los Angeles in the wake of controversy surrounding alleged anti-trans
He's in Los Angeles. That explains a lot.
rhetoric, and he, off the cuff, shouts, "It was a trans man." That's not a hateful remark. He was reacting to the situation, which is what comedians do. You are free to decide for yourself whether or not you find any particular comedy to be funny. Comedy is subjective, but whether or not something should be deemed offensive has an element of objectivity to it, and that remark does not qualify. I'm not here to do an in-depth analysis of all the alleged anti-trans jokes from all the comedians on Netflix, as I haven't even heard all of them, but in general, let's just tone it down a notch. Additionally, regarding the controversy with sports, trans women who have gone through puberty as males, experiencing the dramatic hormonal changes characteristic of any sexually dimorphic species, objectively have an unfair biological advantage over female athletes.
Really? Just the ones going through puberty? What about the ones who don't go through puberty? Do they have an objective biological advantage? I think they probably do.
I personally couldn't care less about sports and who is competing against whom, but people who say that trans women have an unfair athletic advantage are absolutely correct. And to deny this makes any objections to transphobia totally meaningless, because you are refusing to acknowledge what trans people are. As to where trans women should compete, I don't have any solutions because, again, I don't care about sports. But there is a reason that men and women do not compete with one another in almost any sport. So if you are a fan of sports, try to respect that. And that's the end of my rant, which I felt compelled to write down and say out loud, because I'm tired of hearing about the persistent controversy where in my mind there should be none whatsoever. The main takeaway is that the world needs to get over the fact that trans people exist. They've always existed. We are just now acknowledging their existence. We must accept and normalize trans people so that they feel safe to be who they are and express themselves as they choose. But along the way, let's not get swept up by the woke train. Let's make sure that all of our language is guided by science and logic, rather than an accumulation of meaningless cultural currency. Remember, words like sex and gender have real meanings, so let's try to remember what those are and teach them to those who are having some trouble. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
So who's trying to limit human rights? I didn't catch that part. I didn't see anybody trying to limit human rights. Thing is I don't hear anybody saying, well, there are some people, I think, that say, don't be trans. Don't do it. Most people are saying, though, just don't do it to kids. That's really the harshest thing that I usually hear. Just don't do it to kids. Don't transition kids. You want to wait till you're 18 and do it? Fine, go right ahead. I'm going to go a little harsher there and say, don't do it until you're like 25. And I know that might be something that a lot of you are going to suffer. Oh my gosh, I have to pretend like I'm male even though I'm female until I'm 25. Yeah, I know it's terrible. It's a terrible, terrible thing. But at the end of the day, we don't have evidence that this is anything other than a psychological issue. And you even admit it. This David guy, he even admits it in this video that it's a psychological issue. It's not a physiological issue. And we know that transgenders are a thing because, like I said, you just see too many in certain areas and fewer in other areas. If it's biology, then it should be more even. We shouldn't see such a huge rise in people claiming that they're trans like we see here in recent times. It shouldn't be such a big increase. There could be an increase based on people saying, hey, look, it's acceptable now, I'm going to come out. But it's a humongous increase. I've seen specialists in this subject matter talk about how it's not something we would see such a huge increase in nature. This is an unnatural increase. This is obviously something that is socially constructed. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen to so many people. So it was a tough one for me to get through because he has a lot of stuff in here and he speaks very well. And that's where I fail, right? I'm not a good speaker. Some of you pointed that out to me in my comments section. I'm going to leave a copy, or I'm going to leave a link to this video down in the comments, by the way, in case you were wondering. It will be down there as always. Thank you for watching, and I have your palate cleanser for you right here.